AIDS versus AIDS, an instrumental metaphor. Based on the views of Susan Sontag in her text, AIDS and its metaphors, after they've marinated in my thought sauce, that is. A very, very, very abbreviated look at AIDS in comparison to what it has grown into or what we've built it into as society. It's a metaphor, it's a weapon, it's a tool, it's a barrier, it's a word or a predicate noun rather than an acronym. It's a sentence rather than a diagnosis. It's not how life is with AIDS or was before AIDS, but it's death. It's about exploring several words that we could easily and accurately define with the help of reference books or the ever intrinsic Google. So the first word that we look at here is plague. It's a noun meant to describe a contagious or bacterial disease. The next word that we look at is sex, sexual activity, sexual intercourse. By definition, it's a means of reproduction or an expression of intimate affection. And then AIDS itself, standing for acquired immune deficiency syndrome. It's the most advanced stage of HIV infection. It's transmissible by sexual contact, blood, semen, bodily fluids. It, briefly put, destroys the cells required by the body to fight infection, which are the T cells. And these are statistics and facts that we easily found. And then we look at AIDS, doing the quote thing with my fingers. After looking at the facts and statistics that we found and almost would have to avoid in order to miss in some cases, we look at the ones that in avoiding or missing and adding years of uneducated theories and stigmas, we're able to revisit the exact words that we've concretely defined, not only from a different perspective, but in a sort of parallel universe, such that we can both know, or at least know that we can access the literal definition of a word, and yet we continue to use it or allow it to evolve in a completely different and at times contradictory form. We see that plague, as it was looked at as a form of punishment for corrupt or polluted societies, and the verb that we still often use to cause continual trouble or distress to. If you plague somebody with your presence, or plague them with your complaining, so on and so forth. And then we revisit sex. And at the time when AIDS had first come about, sex was thought of as this recreational activity for gays and the morally corrupt. Even now, it still can be considered a method of individual expression and exploration, kind of an adventure, this activity that we can do for fun. And then it was looked at and can still possibly be looked at as a murder weapon of mass destruction. People with AIDS who aren't disclosing or who don't know and are transferring this disease to people that they don't know or people that they love due to either ignorance or denial. And here's what we look at as AIDS, in quotes. It's the visuals, and you Google AIDS, and these are some of the images that I actually came across. No, they weren't the first ones, thanks to contemporary social movements who took up most of the first of the images that came up, but these came up, and when people use their minds as they would Google, these are probably a lot of what the visualization of AIDS is to most people. It's what we know versus what we think. It's harsh reality versus soothing ignorance. It's an us versus them mentality when it's really an us versus us reality. It's a lot to consider.